Robert Rodriguez is one of the most interesting directors of all time. Even if his films come out bad, they exude such a low-budget charm well, charming. He created films like Alita Battle Angels, Sin City, The Faculty, but you probably know him from his children's films, Shorts, The Adventures of Sharkboy and Lavagirl, and our subject of today, Spy Kids. These films in particular are odd. So much so it's difficult to manage to really make a theory. Or is it? Well, yes. Yes it is. Like, a lot. But it doesn't hurt to try. A few days ago, I rewatched Spy Kids, the first movie, and took notes on it while watching it, for a future theory, and I do plan to do the same with the rest of the movies. In fact, I started one for Spy Kids 2. But at least with the first Spy Kids movie, there is so much to discuss in terms of interesting details, it needs its own video to fully delve into. And just to be clear, each Spy Kids movie will most likely get this treatment, and I'll probably do one on Shorts, culminating in a potential ultimate theory solving everything. Sounds good? Okay, let's delve into my notes on the movie. At the beginning of the movie, Ingrid, the mom of Junie and Carmen, tells her children a bedtime story. One that is actually just the story of how Ingrid and Gregorio, I am so sorry if I mispronounce that, please correct me if I am wrong in the comments, the father met. But during her story, she gives an interesting detail. There was turmoil between countries which resulted in the creation of spies, which, from her words, suggest all of this happened recently. And I quote, These were dark and confusing times, an enormous amount of turmoil between countries. Out of fear, a new kind of soldier was created, brilliant, brave soldiers, whose greatest weapons were their minds. Those men and women were spies. And keep in mind, the earliest known date we have in terms of spy creation is 14th century BCE. So this is a clearly very different world where spies were created in the modern age. But that's not the thing that interests me the most. No. Because during the bedtime story, of course it shows flashback footage, and they include possibly the weirdest detail ever. Ingrid is reading a magazine right before she has to go after Gregorio, and that magazine is called Child Today. What? Why? I get it, foreshadowing the Spy Kids aspect, but in terms of the world itself, why would she read a magazine like this? At this point in time, she's very serious about her job and shouldn't care about whatever Child Today has to say. And hell, even if she just picked up a random magazine to read to avoid detection, why would there be a magazine like that to begin with in an airport of all places? I could buy it, like maybe being in a school or a place like made for children, but why an airport? And keep in mind, this was most likely during the time when the countries were in turmoil and spies were created. Then we skip past some stuff and get to the Ingrid and Gregorio's wedding, where we learn a mysterious faction wants them dead, so much so they interrupt the wedding to try and kill them. But the funny thing is, we never learn who the secret faction is, so who exactly are they? Then, after the story is done, we learn Ingrid and Gregorio are no longer spies, but instead consultants for the OSS, or better known as Organization of Super Spies. Interesting. I get the spy part, but why call them super? We'll get to that perhaps in the ultimate theory if the evidence all aligns correctly. We also learn Junie likes creating drawings based on Vegan Floop's show, which Gregorio calls demented, which makes sense when we later learn the truth. Then we see Carmen dragging along Junie to participate in a backyard training course, and also learn this happens every morning. Why does Carmen want to train so much? Junie proceeds to fall during the training course, but does see some hurt from the fall from it. Is the training effective? Junie also, while at school, wishes he could be a part of Vegan Floop's show, and even has an action figure of him. Then, we cut to the real situation regarding Vegan Floop, as he and Mr. Lisp are having a meeting. Basically, Mr. Lisp has given Vegan Floop billions of dollars for him to create an army, which of course turned out to be kidnapped spies of the OSS who went through the mutative process and brain wiping, and it resulted in their brains being turned to mush. So Vegan Floop used them as novelties for his show. But my main question is, who is exactly Mr. Lisp? We don't really know who he is or who he's affiliated with. The point is, he's apparently incredibly rich to simply spend billions of dollars on Vegan Floop. And keep in mind, we never learned who exactly he is or who he's with. Vegan Floop's other invention is of robot children who are insanely strong, and they want the third brain, which has the equivalent intelligence of the best spies for the robots, because at the moment the robots don't have a proper brain. And get this, they are meant to resemble world leaders' children so they can infiltrate the world's governments and take over the world. And Vegan can perfectly replicate Mr. Lisp's son and the president's daughter. Quick question. This is a very bold plan. Firstly, to try and replicate the world leader's children would indicate Vegan and his associates would have access to them to so accurately replicate how they look. Otherwise, how would they be able to accurately replicate them to the point where Mr. Lisp confuses the robot clone of his daughter for his actual daughter? Wait a minute, I'm just reading the script and I realized I previously called Mr. Lisp's child his son, and now I'm referring to them as a daughter. And at the moment I'm recording and I have no idea if it's actually a daughter or son, so I guess future me will let present me know about that, you know. Anyways, back to the theory. Also, to replace the world leader's children would mean you would need access to them. But how exactly do they have access to them? You get the point. And we later learn that Gregorio worked on the third brain. And hell, Vegan Floop manages to get a message into an OSS car, also while having his own cereal. And when Ingrid and Gregorio have to leave to help out with the Vegan Floop situation, Junie and Carmen are left in the care of their uncle, Felix. Felix is revealed to not be Carmen and Junie's uncle, much to their utter shock. Probably just in case Gregorio and Ingrid were called back to spy work, all this time they had Carmen and Junie grow up with Felix as their uncle. It wasn't just because it wasn't just an out-of-the-blue situation when they needed him. Then Felix casually drops that he knows about the third brain. Also, after Junie and Carmen escape the Thumb People, Junie is understandably very upset while Carmen is more level-headed, as if she's been preparing for this herself? I mean, she did like hearing the spy stories Ingrid told her. Wait, no, we aren't supposed to be theorizing yet. Then, when Carmen and Junie arrive at the safe house, we get a very confusing realization they casually move past. Carmen's full name is the password for the safe house.
Your name?
Carmen Cortez?
Your full name, please.
I don't use my full name, it's too long.
Your full name, please.
Carmen Elizabeth Juanita Ecos Cabrava Cortez.
What? And keep in mind, this isn't the last time this happens too. So, why is Carmen's full name the password for the safe house? Also, we casually learn Alexander Minion is literally telling Vegan what to say. He's the puppeteer controlling the puppets. And we also learn the research done on the third brain took place 12 years ago, before the film. And the OSS actively destroyed it. 12 years ago, they were a part of a research team for the OSS, attempting to create a synthetic intelligence, I don't know how to pronounce that word, of spy knowledge, if you will. Research since destroyed. Also, Vegan can change how people look via clay models of their heads, like voodoo dolls. Okay, I'm not even surprised at this point. This movie alone is just a rabbit hole. Carmen and Junie are also surprisingly quick to be spies, and then, here's the thing that while it isn't the most shocking per se, it's definitely the most illogical thing. When the other spies destroyed the third brain once the OSS ordered them to, one person didn't destroy theirs. That person being Gregorio, Junie and Carmen's father. Why? And like Mr. List's background, we never learn why Gregorio didn't destroy his own. They could have easily thrown in a line explaining why, but they didn't. And logically, this move makes no sense. I could see why something like the third brain could be dangerous if it fell into the wrong hands, but could you sit down and explain to me why Gregorio wouldn't destroy his without getting too much into theoretical territory? You can't. Is Gregorio stupid, or does he have something in mind? Also, we meet Mrs. Gradengo. I think that's how I pronounce it. God, these names I can't pronounce. Anyways, a person who pretends to be Carmen and Junie's friend, but in reality is actually working for Mr. Lisp and his side. And an interesting thing is that we see Mrs. Gradengo interact with Gregorio and Ingrid. And from their interactions and what the Spy Kids wiki has told me, it appears that she was a former member of the OSS, and then she ultimately betrayed them to work with Mr. Lisp. And the way Gregorio and Ingrid interact with her gives off the vibes that they really do have personal beef going on. Oh yeah, and remember the little backwards messaging thing they do?
You know that cute little tuneless song the characters sing? Play it backwards.
We're trapped! Loop is a madman, help us, save us! Loop is a madman, help us, save us!
Where they play the footage backwards and the deformed spies reveal the truth of Vegan Floop? Yeah. How would they let that slide? Like, I could imagine Vegan Floop letting something like that slide, but what about Minion? Surely he's smart enough to not let something like that slide through and potentially alert the OSS. Also, funny thing, when Junie and Carmen are yet again escaping the Thumb People, they fly through a store. And despite them doing plenty of stuff in the store to warrant attention, no one seems to bat an eye. The public just goes about their day as they literally have to see these flying children fly by. I mean, maybe I'd buy them not caring if this was New York, but people, this ain't New York. Why don't they care? Also, if you thought the robot clones of the president's daughter and Mr. Lisp's daughter were crazy, take a look at this. This! Robot clones of Junie and Carmen. My main argument for those two stands here. How can Vegan Floop and Minions make clones of these children so accurately if they've never met in person? By what means are the villains in this movie accomplishing the impossible? Also, speaking of these goddamn children, Junie accurately guesses the bracelet Carmen got from Mrs. Grandeco was a tracking device, but Carmen doesn't have the same realization yet. Also, if you thought the people in the store not giving a shit that these children are doing what they are doing was weird, take a look at this scene. When Junie and Carmen are fighting their robot counterparts in the playground, none of the children care about what's happening. But what's ultimately weird is that at one point, a child does acknowledge what's happening. But take a look what happens to the poor boy. As soon as he acknowledges what happens, a mysterious figure promptly takes him away as it cuts to the next scene. What happened to this boy? And why am I so concerned for him? See what I mean when I say there is so much to this movie? Back to the robot children. Vegan has put tags on them, which reveals he wants to sell these as a limited night item, which are called, I you not, Spy Kids. What? And he also has a business called Floop Industries. Interesting. And on each tag, there is a number from 1 to 500, indicating when each one was made. And either Junior or Common robot clones were the first, since the tag they managed to get has number 1 out of 500, which again raises so many questions. The ones for Junie and Carmen were the first? Interesting. Not like Mr. Lisp's daughter or the president's daughter. Anyways, Junie and Carmen figure out pretty quickly that the bad guys want to build an army with a third brain. And while we are on the subject, why do they call it the third brain? It suggests a first and second came before it, but what could those possibly be? Also, Isidore, who we are soon introduced to as the real uncle to Junie and Carmen, owns a shop called Machete's Spy Shop. Just out in public. Again, why does seemingly no one care? Carmen's full name is also the passcode for some of the spy stuff at Machete's Spy Shop. Again, why is Carmen so important? Also, around the end of the movie, Isidore manages to get to the Vegan's castle to help save the day. It raises the question of how he managed to get there, and with perfect timing as a matter of fact. Also, we learn Alexander Minion got kicked out of the OSS, but we never learn why. Back to Machete's Spy Shop, Isidore sells his products to both good and evil. And the plane itself that Isidore allowed Carmen and Junie to use was unstable for some reason. Also, and perhaps the weirdest form of foreshadowing to a future film, the underwater gateway into Vegan's castle is guarded by sleeping sharks. Oh boy, we'll talk about you later, Sharkboy and Lavagirl, begging for attention.
I did not! Mr. Electric, send him to the principal's office and have him expelled!
Alexander Minion and Mrs. Grandeco seem to be a couple of some sorts, and they both did either leave or betray the OSS, so what is their history together? Also, with the Thumbs, Thumb Nurses, and Hand Throne, it makes me question the whole hand obsession going on, because it's so specific. Also, Junie can perfectly replicate Vegan's voice. How can a little boy manage to do this? And how could he possibly hone in his talent so well he literally can just use other people's voices? Also, even when Gregorio and Ingrid first see the robot children of Junie and Carmen, they're shocked, meaning the detail on the clones must be so accurate that it's ridiculous. Also, Gregorio knows who Mr. Lisp is, perhaps either linking Mr. Lisp as another rogue OSS member or a widely known threat. Anyways, we reach the end of the movie as the Thumbs are now living with the Cortez family and the robot children are now doing good deeds all over, and besides those involved in what happened in the movie, no one knows why all these good deeds are happening. So are people just confused about why the world leader's children are doing these good deeds? Or are they aware to some extent about them being robots? And to close off the movie, the president himself calls Carmen and Junie the best agents he's ever seen, and the sensor bar over his eyes are interactable. And wow, that was a wild ride, wasn't it? Hopefully the sequels will be significantly shorter than this video, because oh boy did I consider making this a two-parter. But yes, once I get done with the Spy Kids movie, we'll move on to shorts. Then we'll skip Sharkboy and Lavagirl for now, as we ultimately solve the bizarre world of Robert Rodriguez kids films. But Until next time. Also, YouTube shout out goes to Peach and Drumsy.